Hello, and welcome to Beth, New York Art Conversations. Today we have the pleasure of visiting with Anne Cefola, who is a poet, an artist, and a translator, and a wonderful friend, best. So today we're going to be talking about her wonderful book that she wrote with Jean-Luc Pouliquen, which is called Séquence Long Island, and it's all about Long Island. So we're going to be getting into that in a moment. But first, let us introduce you to the book. Here's the book, which is in French. So what I suggest you do is purchase it through Amazon, because we've discovered, Hannah and I and Jean-Luc, that it's very expensive to send things from France. But you can order it through the publisher, Herman. And what I'd like to do is tell you a little bit before we get into Anne. I'm going to introduce you to Jean-Luc Pouliquen and to Rosanna Warren, so that they aren't forgotten. They've made a significant contribution to this book. So number one, Jean-Luc Pouliquen, I know him for a while now. I worked with him on Transatlantic Conversation and Iden before Moonlight. You can see that it's located on Amazon as well. Jean-Luc was born in 1954 in the south of France. He is a poet and a literary critic. And from 1984 to 1997, he directed Les Cahiers de Garabin. He's very well known in the poetry world in France. You can find information about him on Wikipedia. He's known for writing and reciting and listening with workshops that are in the area where he lives. He lives in Hyères. That's Hyères. For those people who don't know where it's located. And the publications that I selected, there are many publications, only a few. Here, a Mémoire sans fin, a book about Gaston Bachelard, and a book about Georges Pompidou. It's very important for you to get to know Jean-Luc Pouliquen. We say hello to him. And Rosanna Warren, this is wonderful. She wrote the preface. She's a friend of Jean-Luc Pouliquen. She's an American poet, a treasure for America, born in Connecticut in 1953. She's published 7 collections of her work for W.W. Norton, and she's professor emeritus of American and foreign literature at the University of Chicago. She's published many poems with New Yorker magazine. And she's also available in publications in France, in Place de la Sorbonne, Remous, Terre des Femmes. And her most recent book is a translation by Aude Prévin, which is called De Notre Vivant. And I know her best as the author of a wonderful biography about Max Jacob, A Life in Art and Letters, from 2020. And I recently interviewed Alexander Ditka, who's a professor of French at Virginia Tech, and he will tell you about Max Jacob. So look on Substack for my previous interview with Professor Ditka. And now we're going to talk about Anne Cefola. You are amazing, Anne. You received the Robert Penn Warren Award for Lyric Poetry, selected by John Ashbery. And you also were a participant in a translation residency. This was in Witten Bynner. And that was located where?
In Santa Fe.
In Santa Fe, thank you. And you received your MFA from Sarah Lawrence College, which is creme de la creme, if you ask me. Your other books are Face Painting in the Dark, Poems, which is a fabulous book, and Free Ferry, which is a really imaginative idea. You have 2 parts to every page. You've got sort of the main theme, which is the 1960s, life in the suburbs, bossa nova, and dinner parties and such. And then you have an accompanying verse, which is about something which is very disturbing, and that is the testing of the atomic bomb. So, for a moment, can you tell us why did you put these two different themes together?
Uh, well, having grown up in the 60s myself, suburbia had this post-war uh, uh, idealism to it. It felt like a big sigh after the trauma of World War II, and it was wonderful. And yet, at the same time, there was this tension that the Cold War was going on. And so while you had these idyllic suburbs, you also had people who had bomb shelters built in their basements and backyards because there was the very real sense of uh, everything might just go up in smoke one day. So the wonderful post-war sigh of living freely, fathers mowing their lawns, and then the tension, the Russian missile crisis, both of them together created this dichotomy, and I wanted to capture it so that readers could read each page up and down, or if they wanted to go all the way across the top or all the way across the bottom. I wanted a book that could be read in three different ways.
Yes, it's really amazing. And you knew somebody who worked at Fermilab, didn't
Yes,
you?
yes, I indeed. We have a family member, and so I had heard the stories of that experience, and they were so particular and amazing. I really wanted to record them.
So that I think is also very important to know. And you're a translator. So you
Yes,
have been translating Hélène Sanguinetti for I don't know how many years.
uh, about it's been about 30 years.
Is it? God, time flies. So Alparago is the most recent book. This is
Yes,
like nothing else. And the previous books that were published, the books that were published on her poetry were hence this cradle.
that was
Yes.
the first with seismicity editions, and then the second was The Hero from Chax Press.
Yes, you have been very busy. And the hero is a long epic poem. It's really quite remarkable.
Yes.
How did you meet Hélène?
So after I graduated the Sarah Lawrence writing program, I really wanted to use my French translating poetry. So I spent months querying universities in France and journals, and I was really getting nowhere because this is what happens. Famous poets in France have translators already that they trust and know. And then there are other poets that I just don't know them as an American. I don't have access to them. So I queried the Poetry Center in Avignon, and to my great fortune, there was an expat, a Texan who was working there. And she said to me, "Oh, you should translate my friend Hélène Sanguinetti. She just had a new book come out from Flammarion." And so I didn't even, it wasn't even a question of how she wrote. I said, this is a poet who's free, who doesn't have a translator. I'm going to jump on it. So I spent quite a lot of money to order the book from France, and I got it. And I just started working on it. And eventually, the poetry editor, Yves Demano at Flammarion, let Hélène know that someone in the United States was translating her work, and she reached out to me, very gracious, and said, "If there's anything I can do to help, please let me know. I'm thrilled that you're translating me."
This is very difficult poetry. It's full of words and sounds, and it also sits on the page extremely differently from most poems. It's really a challenge. How did you feel about having to take on something which was experimental poetry?
In a way, it made it easier because I had to translate it literally. So whenever I tried to soften or create more sense, Hélène would say to me very firmly, "This is not what I'm doing." So the language has really sharp edges. It can feel disjointed, and what she wants to do is wake up the reader to have the language be just off enough that the reader has to pay more attention, has to sort of cling to every word. And people who have read it. My husband says Hélène gets under your skin.
Oh,
After a while, there's a logic to it, and it's very rewarding.
that's fabulous. And what about for your own poetry? Do you feel as though it's in any way influenced it or loosened you up?
Well, that's a good question. I would have never have written Free Fairy with the two storylines if I hadn't been translating Hélène.
Wow.
I mean, she
So,
inspired me because
mhm.
she did that in the first book translation, hence this cradle. She has the main text, and then she has a smaller text along the bottom, sometimes even like little footnotes. And it's really audacious, and it's also fun.
That's true. It is audacious. That's the perfect word because the two of you now, I'm thinking about how you feel as far as I'm concerned, you feel really freed up to experiment with whatever it is that you feel your heart desires. And so with poetry, it seems the antithesis. With
Yes,
poetry, you feel as though there are rules and there's meter and there's just much more of a demand on your attention to what is required. But you both of you are really just letting it rip. So it's great. But let's get to Long Island. All right. So I'm going to return to this beautiful book and the cover. Tell us a little bit about how this started out. Why did you choose to write about Long Island?
it was really Jean-Luc's idea. I had moved here 4 years ago, and I think he was really taken with this sense of an island. And, for us in the metropolitan area, Long Island's like a well-known relative. We don't ascribe anything magical to it. It's just something we've always known. And so I resisted the idea at first, and he persisted. And finally, I said, okay, I can start out by writing a little memoir about going to Jones Beach during the 1960s. This was the only ocean front that we had. If you lived in Westchester, uh, people would make the trek out to uh, Jones Beach, and it would be very rewarding to see the ocean, spend the day there. And so we started with that, and then he really spent a year researching Long Island French facts, people who were here who may have had some influence, such as Saint-Exupéry, who wrote The Little Prince on Long Island, and most people don't know that. So he came back about a year later with all this rich research and picking up from my emails, conversations we had had. And then I responded with more essays, and then he combined it all.
So we're going to get to some of the topics, but before I forget to discuss this, who decided on this title, Séquence?
Uh,
That's interesting. Not
really,
séance, but séquence.
Jean-Luc did, because it is really him talking about his own home, and then me talking about my home, and then his wonderful research, which was enlightening and interesting. And then we sort of fed off of each other. And it was a sequence, and it was around Long Island. So I think it made sense.
And I'm looking at the beautiful cover. Tell us about the cover. Who decided on the cover?
So that's a watercolor I did of Shelter Island, probably about 40 years ago, if not more. I was visiting my godmother, who had a house right on the water, on Shelter Island. Now, Shelter Island is right in the middle of the forks uh, of Long Island, so it's considered part of Long Island. It's a very quaint New Englandy kind of experience. And anyway, so I did this painting when I was probably about 24 years old, and I had always wanted it to be the cover of a poetry book. So
Oh,
when we had come up with this Séquence Long Island, I thought, here's my chance. And fortunately, the publisher loved it and created the cover with it.
it's gorgeous. Thank you for telling us the story. That's exciting. So Long Island. So where were you born?
So I was born in Westchester and raised there. And again, my only experience with Long Island was going to Jones Beach, as a kid with the family, or as a senior graduating from high school. We all went there after the prom, and it
Yep.
it was part of our local tradition.
Yes, ours too, from high school. So tell me something. You ended up in Long Island. So how is this? By chance, by design? What made you move from Westchester to Long Island?
Well, my husband and I were looking to downsize. We didn't want to move out of the area and lose all our friendships. My wonderful friendship with Beth, I want to still be able to see her. So what happened was a family member offered us their home, and it just seemed like kismet. It just seemed like the right thing to do. And again, really only an hour away from where we were, and also very much a new and different environment, really physically and then also culturally, very different. So it was, it's nice to discover a new place without going too far from home.
This is what's really remarkable for me. So did you find by working with on this project with Jean-Luc that you learned a lot more about Long Island that maybe you hadn't even thought to ask?
Oh yes, I mean, I never knew that, The Little Prince was written here. I never knew that there was a composer who wrote this big symphony about Long Island, and he was a French composer. Uh, and so while I was discovering all sorts of things about my new home, the preference for bagels, there being a bagel shop every mile or so. Jean-Luc was researching things in France. So yeah, it was really a voyage of discovery.
Well, you have a lot of topics. You talk about Bob Dylan, you talk about the bagels, you talk about broccoli, you talk about Melville. So Moby Dick, tell us a little bit about you have a very interesting experience with Moby Dick on Long Island. What did you do?
Well, a friend of mine moved to Sag Harbor, which is again the Forks, and they had in the town of Sag Harbor they have a Moby Dick marathon reading, and so I signed up for it, and I went to the library and I read my. They assigned me a certain part, and I read my Moby Dick part, and it was pretty exciting. One of the characters in Moby Dick is actually called Sag Harbor. It's just references a sailor named Sag Harbor. But, it's that connection, and Sag Harbor certainly has a rich history with whaling. There's a whaling museum there. So it was very exciting. It felt like getting close to Melville.
Yes, I thought it was wonderful that you participated in this marathon. There's a lot of things that you do on Long Island that are different from what you would have done if you stayed in Westchester.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about you do in the book talk about Edith Wharton. How did that come up? I mean, she didn't live on Long Island, did she?
No, she had a home in Yare,
Yeah.
Jean-Luc's home. And he's very proud of that. And apparently it's beautiful. And so in our back and forth, I reflected on my response to her work when I read it, years ago. To me, it just felt like New York society hadn't changed all that much. Being in Westchester, Beth, as I know, that there's a lot of exposure to people, Rockefellers, people,
Yeah. Yeah.
people of import and prestige. And what Wharton describes in her society, even though it took place 100 years ago or more, it just felt like I was reading about a world I'd been exposed to. And so I shared that in the book, that nothing much has changed.
That's true. I mean, The Gilded Age, which is on television right now, has used her book as a reference. And then we have Friends and Neighbors. It's another series in which you see class distinctions. So this is true. Do you feel that way in Long Island? You get the sense of class distinctions?
No, I really don't. I think the distinction might be more in the South Fork, the Hamptons, where there are, Paul McCartney's out there. There are a lot of Jimmy Fallon of The Tonight Show. People of means have beautiful homes out there and access to the water and the beaches, and but here it feels more really uh, um, middle class.
Yeah, I would think so. So, in that respect, though, you mentioned The Great Gatsby, which is the summertime, it's Gatsby time. So, are you feeling it? I mean, did you just tell me a little bit about how Gatsby got into the conversation for the book that you wrote with Jean-Luc?
Well, Jean-Luc mentioned, everybody knows this anecdote, so I'm just going to repeat it. Uh, uh, F. Scott Fitzgerald was in France and he really wanted to meet Edith Wharton. And Edith Wharton was, I guess, at Hyères. And so she invited him to one of her teas, and that, as if you watch The Gilded Age, a tea is a very formal event in the afternoon. So he had tanked up pretty much before he even stepped in her house. And he came in with a friend and he told a lot of off-color jokes. And so Edith Wharton that night wrote in her journal um, something to the effect of F. Scott Fitzgerald, horrible.
That's a really great anecdote. Thank you for telling us that because we know yeah, he was an alcoholic, but the most important thing is that we are talking about Gatsby. So
Yes,
we are expecting, that
yeah,
obviously, we don't know that much about the relationship between F. Scott Fitzgerald and the person that he invented, the Gatsby individual who looms large in our imagination. But we know that he's a combination of things. But you have an insight into this Gatsby that is in the book that's
yeah,
really fabulous. So you studied with a person who changed the music about where this is located.
yeah,
It's not on Long Island, is it?
yeah. Uh, in all fairness, he did write the book in Great Neck. He rented a house, so he wrote the book in Great Neck. So we have to salute Long Island for that. I had a teacher in the graduate writing program by the name of Barbara Probst Solomon, and she did some research and she felt very strongly that Gatsby really was based on Westport because he and Zelda stayed at a little gray colonial in the first months of their marriage. And next to that little gray colonial was, at the time, a millionaire who threw lavish parties. And she did the research and there was even a little green light on the end of his dock. So in Gatsby, the town is West Egg. So Barbara posited this is really Westport, and they made a film based on this, and I encourage everybody to Google it. You can watch it on YouTube, and it's very convincing. And at the end in the film, when they show the discussion after previewing the film, they somebody from Long Island Historical Society stands up and says, "Long Island concedes to Connecticut."
But it's everyone should watch this because it's a drama. Although, this is a documentary,
Yeah,
there is at the very beginning of it, it's kind of an arc in which people are saying, no, 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 no. I have been working on
yeah,
F. Scott Fitzgerald all my life, and this is just not
yes,
a possibility.
yeah.
And you see how dynamic history is because it's significant to see how there's certain facts that we just take for granted, but they're not actually fixed. And I think that Professor Solomon had a good deal of courage. She stuck to it. She did her work. She was a real investigator. And that's, of course, the wonderful thing about doing. But was she a history professor? I don't think
No,
so.
but she just was
No.
very plugged in. She lived in Midtown Manhattan, and I remember one day her coming to the class, and at the time the mayor was Rudy Giuliani, and she came into the class, and she just happened to mention casually that his lover or his mistress was living with him, and Gracie Mansion, and the entire class just gasped. And she was just like, "What? I thought you knew that. I thought everyone knew that." And so she was that wonderful kind of, kind of had that Dorothy Parker edge that she was very plugged in, and you had that sense when you were around her listening to her talk.
So this is what's the magic part of this book. Are you going to translate this book?
Maybe one day. Right now, I'm just trying to get French readers to and French bookstores to pick it up at this point.
Yes,
And
Albertine. We have to get in touch with Albertine. But the whole idea for me, of course, is that it's just full of these juicy little nuggets. Not about Giuliani. I'm sorry that
yeah,
don't let us lead you astray.
yeah.
But you talk about so many really fascinating facts. And for the final thing, we're not going to keep everybody too long. But can you tell us what is Long Island? It's not an island. So what is it? You start out with that as your introduction to your stories.
Yes, it's actually a moraine, which is a word that means a bunch of silt and dirt and granite that was dumped by a glacier in the last ice age. So I think a glacier melted or came down over Connecticut, and this was the calling card it left.
Yes, and so that's also the fascinating thing. Long Island is not an island.
Right.
It's
It's long.
peninsula. It's just long. Exactly. So anyway, I let us encourage everyone to please buy the book. It's located for us Americans on Amazon, so that way you'll be able to get it
Mhm.
really quickly. I got it in 2 days. It was fabulous. And what is your next project? You have, I'm putting you on the spot.
Oh,
Do you have another project that we can look forward to?
oh, I have Hélène Sanguinetti's latest book, which is called, it has an English title called Do Not Cross and then slash Ne Pas Franchir. And she takes that title from the signs you see in museums and galleries, like not to get close to the artwork. And she's inspired by a sculpture by Kiki Smith, who is a famous American sculptor, and she saw her work in France and was so taken with it that she wrote a whole book.
Wow, Kiki Smith too. This is fabulous.
Yeah,
Thank you. Thank you so much for this wonderful opportunity to
thank
visit with you on
you.
Long Island.
Thank
and just to remind everybody to buy this book,
you.
Séquence Long Island. And we want both of us a shout out. Bonjour, bonjour, Jean-Luc. We wish you were here. And so, prochaine fois. Take care. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining us, and have a wonderful day. Bye.